crunch, bring it back, single leg swing. Let me teach you how to wrestle. Okay. Let me teach you how to wrestle. Hit the
morning, got my kids off to school, had a little breakfast. I thought I was gonna get a workout in before this, but it's gonna be after this. So excited to talk to you. And actually, my August, well, actually, kind of my whole summer was kind of insane, but my life has slowed down a little bit. So it's nice to have a few extra minutes to do some things. So I'm excited to talk to you right now.
Absolutely. Slowing down because the kids? It kind of keeps you in one place?
School helps, but man, in summer there was just so many wrestling tournaments, and you know what? I generally don't travel for wrestling camps, but I kind of maybe agreed to do too many. You're just kind of like, I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes, someone says something, I'll say, yeah, and then I'll go back and I'll look at like the totality of what I said yes to. I'm like, oh, shit. Why did I say yes to all that? Like, I'm so busy. So that definitely happens to me sometimes where, people will ask things and I'll say yes, and then I'll go back and look at it. Oh my God, I said yes to way too many things, and I'm like insanely busy. So next summer I'm gonna be more disciplined. I'm gonna say no to a few more things. So my summer's not quite as busy, and if it's not as busy doing other things, I'll probably fill it with either family time and/or I always love coaching my kids at the academy, and when they're not in school in the summer, then I can get them in during the days or stuff like that. So I'm sure I'll still be busy, just not quite traveling as crazily as I was this summer.
Absolutely. As you're talking, I think, I think if you're a yes man, it's a good thing to be a yes man because you're going to be, it means you love people, you love what you do. You're not hesitating. There's no paralysis to analysis. On the other hand, we have to also be good at saying no, because otherwise we're saying yes to everything. We don't get other things accomplished. So it kind of feeds into what we're talking about with paradox a little bit, right? And a lot of the great work that you've done talking about wrestlers, athletes, and just people in general, how they have to exist in this world of paradox. So if you wanted to comment on that.
We can talk about that book coming out, it's Extreme Balance. You can see the background, but you said, I think you said the word grateful, and it's extreme gratefulness, and it is like, say if I go travel somewhere and I teach a camp, like I love doing that, I really love it. Like, sometimes I'll be like, oh man, I'm really not looking forward to traveling and say going away from my family or going away from the academy, and I'll get there and like I love to teach wrestling, I love to inspire the love of wrestling in people. And so when I'm there, it's like, I love this. But then it's like, man, I'm missing my family or I'm missing time at the academy. And so it's hard because I kind of wish there was more time or, for something like that. And so I guess I'm grateful to be able to do whatever I want in life and to do things I really, really enjoy. But it does sometimes feel like, man, I wish there was a little more time.
Oh yeah, I actually spoke to this about this with Joe DeSena a few years ago, co-author of the book, and I asked him once, how do you balance being a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a family man? And I said, where's the work-life balance? And he corrected me, said it's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. And then I see different things, like he's bringing his kids with him, different places, he's exercising with them, he's living it. Yeah. So you've probably seen that.
Same thing. So I went and shot some. I went and shot some content with Joe I flew to Orlando last Thursday night, and then I was there on Friday and we filmed content, but I do this thing with my own kids. It's funny that you brought up him and his kids. His kids were, I think I saw two of his kids that day. But my kids, every year past age 5, I take them on a trip with me somewhere. So, each one of them individually, just so they can see kind of what I do and they can spend some more one-on-one time with me. And so Last week, I took Andy, she's 9 now, just her 9. I took her with me for the trip. It does create a little bit of a hassle because you got to make sure you take care of your 9-year-old. But it's awesome to have them around and to get to see what you do and that type of thing. And so I think it really is important to have that work-life integration. And my kids are always coming to the wrestling academy with me and that type of thing. But I do think it is also important to give them that really focused time. Sometimes.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. It's a both and I think that's what the paradoxes are. The paradoxes are not so much either or, and that's a hard thing, thinking about, the psychology background. It's like a lot of people have a hard time existing with both and rather than either or.
Well, that's what this whole, honestly, the whole book is about is So past chapter, I believe it's chapter 5. I want to say this so I get it correct. Yes, it's chapter 5. The first 4 chapters are kind of like an introductory, if you will, kind of explaining the mentality. But then after that, everything is and that was what I saw in sports psychology literature. I saw them explain something, and then they would explain something else and something else. But for a lot of kids and even adults, sometimes integrating concepts that are paradoxical. My initial thought for this was hypocritical, actually, right? They're in contradiction to each other. You're being a hypocrite of something else you think. That's really, really challenging. And so kind of the whole book, Extreme Balance, it comes out next Tuesday, the whole book is about doing both of them at the same time, right? And so, like, say, we can kick it off with this one.
Good. Oh, yeah.
Chapter 5 is caring deeply and keeping it in perspective. And you have to do both. And, you think about sometimes these elite athletes get interviewed after their national title, and they say something like, oh, this is only part of my life, or, Jesus is bigger, or just another wrestling match. These things where they're literally keeping it in perspective. But then you think at the same, and so, for me, I actually almost don't like it sometimes, because sometimes I feel like it gives the perspective to kids who can't think more deeply that they don't really care that much about this. Oh, it's only just a little part of their life. But that's not true, because if they didn't care really deeply about it, there's no way they were going to do the amount of work that it took them to get right here. So it's very clear, because I know some of them, and I've watched them work. It's very, very clear and evident that they care deeply. But then they're also keeping it in perspective, which is a healthy balance to have if you want to be an elite athlete.
Absolutely. And you're right. They do talk about this in therapy psychology circles, specifically in dialectical behavioral therapy, which has been particularly helpful with extreme cases of personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. And not to go too far into the weeds with that, but
no, go into the weeds. I love it.
Yeah. No, I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy is more the relationship between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And if you change your thoughts, you impact your emotions and behaviors. If you change your emotions, you impact your thoughts and your behaviors. And if you impact your behaviors, you impact your thoughts and your emotions. And that triangle, right? Dialectical behavioral therapy is more of, so what you would tend to see in more cognitive behavioral therapy is like almost a civil war in your brain to some extent going on, where sure. I have a bad thought, I challenge it with a good thought. I challenge a negative thought with a positive thought, which you need. That's important too. A dialectical behavioral therapy talks a lot more about understanding paradox, and it's more of, instead of engaging in that civil war in your brain, it's more of an acceptance and changing the relationship to your thoughts, allowing them to come and go, just like we would a bad movie or a bad dream. I recognize I watched something scary or sad. I recognize I just had a bad dream, but I let it go, and knowing that we could do that with our thoughts too.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's I would say that chapter 5, and one of the reasons it's the lead off is it's the most common, right? The most common. I don't know about you guys. I've done the Mental Mondays. This is what you do. You can tell me if I'm wrong here. No. The number one most common question I've had over, I've been doing Mental Mondays for a long time now, many years. I don't know how long it's been. Is some form of, right? There's some form of, my kid is great in practice but bad in matches. My kid is great in small matches but bad in big matches. My kid gets to the big match and always wrestles terribly. Like something like this, where it's clear and evident they're failing to keep it in perspective, right? They care deeply, and because they care deeply, it causes them to wrestle differently, and most of the time, almost all the time, wrestle worse than they would normally.
Yeah, and you see that at all different levels, from elementary school right through college and Olympics. I mean, I think back to the Flow Wrestling interview, the emotional interview when you were talking about Max, knowing there was another level he could get to that people just weren't seeing, and then when he was able to wrestle more free, how he just looked awesome, and he looked awesome before, but he looked even more awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that was him for sure. It was funny for him, and actually I've had a couple other athletes. And, Max was a little more challenging, but some of the other athletes, sometimes, I'll give you one, right? I'll just give you an example, and is Noah Mulvaney, who's at Bucknell right now. He was good as a kid, and then he kind of had like a dip where he wasn't quite as successful. I mean, he was good at the state level, but was kind of failing to break through at the national level, and, maybe taking, it's really funny because the 2 state losses he actually took, which he wanted to win both state titles, was Connor Marisol and Aiden Sinclair, two guys who would go on to be number one in the country. But he then had a breakthrough after his sophomore year. So his freshman and sophomore years where he was kind of struggling at a national level. And he got ranked in the country. I think I'm getting these years right, I hope. It could be 1 year later, potentially. Anyways, he had a breakthrough. And all of a sudden, at the beginning of the high school season, he had kind of a bunch of bad matches. And I was like, dude, you are a great competitor. I've watched you compete since you were 9 years old. And, he's one of those kids who actually maybe wrestled better than he actually was. You watch him in the practice room, and you're like, he's not that good. And then he shows up and he beats some good dudes. You're like, wait, how did that happen? So he was kind of one of those guys, and he starts wrestling poorly. And I said, dude, what's up? And he was like, I finally got nationally ranked, and now I feel like I got to protect my national ranking every time.
Yes.
And so for him, it was easy because it's like, listen, I've been watching you compete for years. You're a great competitor. So you need to just forget whatever happened in the last month or two and remember who you've been your whole life. Because you've been a great competitor. And he was able to kind of shake it off and get back to where he was. And so, when kids have already experienced that kind of great competitor type, you just have to remind them, you already know what this feels like. You just need to get back to that. You need to get, kind of get out of your own way. And, so for kids who've never had that, for kids who, for whatever reason, always kind of had the care too deeply, performance anxiety type of mentality. And lots of times I think it stems from parental behavior.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to dig into that. We could, obviously. I think it stems from parental behavior. For kids who've never been there, it's harder to get them there because they haven't experienced it. They haven't felt it. And so it's you got to get them to feel it, and that can be more challenging.
Both. This is why the mental part of the sport is important at any point in time in your career. It's not, some parents will say, or coaches will say, well, this kid needs it, that kid doesn't need it. It's that's not really a very sophisticated way of it. Yeah, it's not a sophisticated way of looking at it because it's not like these constructs remain stable. It's not like confidence and motivation remain stable throughout your career. So that changes. And then also different dynamics change. Even outside of wrestling, you get to drive. You get a girlfriend. Now that you're exposed to more, you have it. Now you're seeing your name. Well, for us, it was the newspaper, but now it's on social media. You're becoming a rising celebrity, a lot of these kids. So the dynamics just change.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, yeah. So I mean, that was a good one is, caring too deeply and keeping in perspective. And so that's kind of what the whole book is about, is balancing things. Another one that I think we have talked about before is, preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected. That's chapter 9, and that's one where, especially I feel like this is life. Joe and I did content last week, and he said for him this was coronavirus because who the hell could have predicted that one? No. You could have prepared as well as you wanted, but you were not predicting the world shutting down. And he's like, that was us. We thought we were crushing it, and then all of a sudden the world shuts down, and we are, they're an events company essentially. And you can't host events. What are you going to do? And so preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected is really important because there's some athletes who are awesome at preparing. They do all the things right, but then they get into the moment and something goes wrong, right? It's a bad call. It's an injury. It's an illness. And they panic and they don't know how to react. So what is your guys' strategy for having someone balance that, or someone who's great on one side of that but not great on the other?
Yeah, because you need both. So we always look at it as there's foundation level mindset. It was never really broken down like this in my classes, but I just saw a difference because there's certain constructs that tend to cluster together as a general rule. Goal setting, mental toughness, and motivation. I look at that as the base of your mindset pyramid, right? You need to have that, and that's different than maybe the present moment, the relaxing under pressure, the confidence, the aggressiveness, the clarity. I look at that as more phase 2 peak performance level. Now, there was a chart that broke this down a little bit in, who wrote this? Florescu. I could send you. It was a study in 1971 talking about the constructs of wrestlers, the biomotor qualities, the physiological, and the psychological.
Did it have wrestlers?
Yeah, this back in 1971. Yeah, no, it's really cool stuff. And they were talking about how motivation, it was determination, initiative, and what was the one? It was something like confidence. And I realized and they were saying the predictors of a good wrestler might be a little bit different physiologically, psychologically, and biomotors. The predictors of someone who's going to partake in wrestling are different than actually the champions now. Like, what does it look like once you're actually on top? Like, in other words, the factors change in levels of importance because now things start to be even. Like, strength is important, but this is a weight class sport, right? If it wasn't a weight class sport, strength would be even more important, right? Conditioning, we know we got to be in great shape. We got to be in great shape. But at the highest level, everyone's working hard. It's not like you're going to just run.
I literally, Joe and I had this conversation at the dinner table last week for sure. I said something to the effect, and you can tell me if you agree with me.
Good.
I said, by the time they get to be a Division I athlete, Division I wrestler, that's a really high level. Almost anyone who doesn't want to work hard and who's not tough, they're already gone.
They're out.
Like, they don't really exist anymore.
Right. So a lot of these constructs, physiologically or psychologically, get neutralized to some extent. Of course, they're still
real. It's like, and so it's like, and that's kind of honestly one of my general theses on college wrestlers and college wrestling coaches. I think a lot of them they're just intellectually lazy to a certain extent. But I say once you get to the college level, most of these people are weeded out. If you're not tough and you haven't worked hard, so how much tougher can you get, and how much harder can you work? Right, and a lot of times, even if it's a 10% or a 20% increase on either one of those categories, maybe it's a little bit, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You obviously just keep working hard and keep being tough. Right, it's not be lazy and be wimpy. I'm not saying that. That's clearly not my argument. But it's like you can make so much more gains from figuring out positions from a technical perspective, right, or clearing roadblocks from your mind. And I think that's really you go back to talk about this extreme balance again is. I feel like that's kind of what I've tried. I feel like this book is what I've tried to practice on my athletes at AWA for the last now 13 years, right? So I've been refining my craft at it. It's clear out mental hurdles and then continue to increase them technically where, they can now do all these different things. So I view wrestling match as a puzzle, right? So you get in a wrestling match, it's a puzzle. You got to figure out which pieces go together. Everyone you're going to wrestle is a little bit different. Every match you're going to wrestle is a little different. So figure out the right tools or the right pieces of the puzzle. So I think at a high level, you can make so many more gains by improving yourself technically and then clearing out mental hurdles.
Yeah.
That's my thesis.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, the one thing's always said about Ben Askren wrestling and competing, you're playing chess while other people are playing checkers because, you're thinking moves ahead, and you're right. And I also look at, mindset. You're saying there's removing what's negative, like what's holding me back. And the other side of it is building positive tools that are going to help me. So they're linked, but they're not necessarily identical. Removing negatives, but adding on positives.
Well, how do you feel about this statement?
Yeah.
I've obviously worked with a lot of kids at AWA, but you've probably worked with equally as many specifically on the mindset portion. I don't know if I've ever ran across a perfect athlete mentally. Like there's always something to clear up. Whether it's Aiden Sinclair or Mitchell Messermink or Keegan O'Toole, and generally the elite ones they're a little bit extreme, right? They're a little bit extreme, but there's still something in there. You go through the 9 chapters of mindset and extreme balance. And it's like there's a couple of them that are off. Right, and you got to bring that balance up. Have you found that to be the case with people you worked with?
Of course, and I would think at the highest level, when you look at guys like the top bodybuilders, who these guys are just jacked, and it looks like they have no flaws. And a lot of these people, they're saying they hate the way they look. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I just saw a video of him saying, I never liked the way I look. Now, was he just saying that for show, or did he really feel like that? I have to believe they were chasing almost a perfect standard, and that's yet again another paradox. You have to chase perfection, but be comfortable never arriving there. So that's
where it gets to, but to some extent that's body dysmorphia, which could be negative.
Right. I was going to say.
The author, David Sachs, he was a PhD in sports psychology who helped us write the book. I wish I should have had it bookmarked because I don't want to go dig through this. It'd be terrible podcasting if I dug through to find the exact paragraph. But he essentially said a lot of these qualities for elite athletes, they're going to be borderline personality disorders.
Right.
They're going to be borderline narcissistic or borderline. And it's having the balance on the other side that keeps you from having personality disorders.
Right, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the wrestlers now when they're in their interviews talking so much about faith, gratitude, fun, because they realize they need to put that in the forefront of their mind so they can be borderline obsessed. Like they need to go hard in that other direction too. The difficulty is when you have, like you said, when you have a young athlete or just a young person who's trying to climb the ranks in anything, and all they're hearing might be the fun, and they're not seeing the dogged hard work,
Yes.
and the obsession, the fanaticism to get there. So that's why your work, what you're doing there with Joe, again, highly successful people. You guys know what you're talking about. These kids need this, and not these kids. The people need this.
Yeah, 100%. You need to realize there's both those balances. But I do think, on a general, and actually, I've pitched him on it a couple times. I wish Kale would talk more. I really do. He's clearly doing.
We all do.
That son of a gun. He's clearly doing something special.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of heat for saying this other part. Dan Gable was very clearly a great coach. I mean, you could argue the best of all time for sure. But I think the Iowa-style mentality did a little bit of a disservice to wrestling because not every coach is Dan Gable, and therefore when they try to employ some type of Iowa style, it's maybe too hard immediately for kids, and then there's a ton of burnout, and that's kind of and I feel like Penn State's not doing that exactly, and look at the amount of success they're having. So now it's apparent that, hey guys, you don't have to go Iowa style to be immensely successful. Let's do this a little different. And then that's now, and so I'm trying to do the opposite of Kale, is we've now built this. I always said I don't want to preach to people till I freaking do it. I hated people who preach and say, oh, I know how to coach wrestling. And it's like, but you are a great wrestler, but you haven't built a great wrestling program. Now we've built a great wrestling program at AWA, and I can say explicitly, we do not go Iowa style, especially on the younger kids. We wait. They do work hard. They work very hard, but most of the hard work is like, let's say 12 years enough, 12, 13, somewhere in there. Like, that's when we really start ramping it up with athletes. And so you'll see a lot of our kids aren't having as much success when they're 8th graders and 9th graders, but then they just keep getting better and better and better.
Yeah, and it's tough because just like there's the balance, like you're saying, that this extreme balance, and how constructs don't remain the same. The times aren't the same. So if you're looking at the Gable style, like 70s, 80s, were the kids inundated with the sport of wrestling like they are now, where it's like their whole life, and how much they compete and how much they practice, and all the clubs and all the press with it, they might have actually needed to do that more to some extent, as much as you would need to do something. They might have needed to do that to get to that level higher. Whereas now the wrestlers, they're spending a lot of time already.
Yeah, and obviously they have the other thing they have now, which you can. And I was just maybe like a year ago. I don't know what I was doing, but I went to YouTube for something. Speaking of that, I'm putting out some videos on YouTube, so check them out. But I went to YouTube for something, and I saw like the 1997 NCAA Finals. So I'm like, whatever, I'm going to click it, And I think I was doing something else, and it was, the NCAA Finals going, and it was wild. Like, you forget how much wrestling has changed, right? It was like, oh my God, this is so different. And, I think I went to college in 2002, so that's not that far off from 1997. Right. Some of these guys who were wrestling were the guys who were the very best, senior level athletes and or coaches in 2002. And I think, like what I'm doing just in my head with that, if I don't think about it, I think, well, what I'm doing now is what I was doing then, but it's really not,
The time is now to take your mindset to the next level with Wrestling Mindset. Make sure you go to our website, WrestlingMindset.com, and sign up for your free trial session today. Don't wait any longer. You want the mental edge right now. When you sign up for the free trial session, you're also going to get a copy of our free ebook, Building the Predator Mindset. This book has helped thousands of people build confidence, relax under pressure, get motivated, and build mental toughness in wrestling, school, and life. Make sure you sign up for your free trial session today.
And then so you watch the 2024 NCAA Finals, and the action happens so much faster. There's so much more going on. And, to your point, like the kids are inundated with it. They're definitely getting better earlier. That's not even arguable. But they also have all this access to technical stuff because they can watch on Flow Wrestling or YouTube or wherever. And so they're picking up these techniques also much quicker and at a much earlier age. And so the sport is really, really speeding up.
Yeah, no, I think about that too, and it's like, and how much that maybe that mentality, that Iowa style mentality, like it helps us and it hurts us, right? Anything taken to excess, you see, Aristotle even spoke about this with virtue ethics back 300 BC. Virtue lies in the golden mean. So you could sin by excess or by defect, right? When you're bowling, you got to bowl it right down the middle. If you bowl too much to the right, bowl too much to the left, you gutter ball, right? So, our country, it seems like our ethos or our animating spirit of our country is basically do everything and out everything everyone. Just throw a lot of stuff at the wall, something will stick, and I want to do everything. Whereas when I read the Russian books, the Japanese books on wrestling and training, it seems like they're taking a more scientific approach. They're looking at things more in terms of efficiency, energy input, energy output. Don't do more where less is.
What Japanese do? I mean, because they've had a lot of success recently. I mean, the women's program has been good forever, but they're now having a lot more success on the men's side. Where are you watching these videos?
Books. So I just interviewed Tadaki.
They put out books?
These are old books to find. I had to pay a pretty penny for some of these things on eBay. So Tadaki Hata's book, which Date was Olympic champ from Japan, he said it was the best wrestling book he's ever seen, and John Smith endorsed the book. Anyway, Tadaki Hata put out a book. And then he told me that the master texts for Japanese wrestling, because Tadaki Hata, his father was Ichiro Hata, the father of Japanese wrestling, who studied directly under Jigoro Kano, who's the founder of judo. He was his secretary. I got a video coming out on the whole roots of Japanese wrestling and its connection to judo. But he said that the two master texts for Japanese wrestling were Shozo Sasahara, who was 1956 Olympic champ, Scientific Approach to Wrestling, and something else, Science of Wrestling. I could send you those books. I have to buy them from overseas.
Send me a link. I'll buy them. I'm into reading and I'm into learning more. I honestly didn't know these existed. So
and these are
funny. See a different perspective. I mean, and I always think since I fought, I got to see a lot of different perspectives because it's like, how did the jiu-jitsu people teach? How did the kickboxing people teach? And I could tell you, say Duke Rufus, who was the mixed martial, he's the gym I went to. He's originally a kickboxer. But the thing I stole from him for sure was much more strategical, tactical teaching. Now, this is a single leg, this is how you do it, right? Which obviously, if you're teaching little kids, that's for sure what you do, right? But instead, it's well, here's a single leg. And when I shoot the single leg, here's their options. Here's what they may do. And then then if they do this, and this is what I do, this is why I would do this, right? And kind of explaining through the entirety of the process, not here's a move, here's a move, here's a move, And so, he would say, someone punches us, you're going to parry, and after you parry, here's some options, but here's also what might come back at you afterwards, that type of thing. So I love different perspectives. So send me the link. I would love to check those out.
Oh, yeah. And Bruce Lee did a lot of what you're talking about right there. If you look at his book about Jeet Kune Do, he's taking in information from boxers, from fencing, and he's doing unarmed combat. He's talking about how the footwork of fencers, because it comes down to, and again, that the Japanese and that Soviet approach was looking at things more in terms of human dynamics, right? And I've about 6 different Russian books that are completely in Russian on wrestling. I was talking to Valentin Kalika.
You can read Russian?
No, I can't. But I would like to get these. I would like to get the English copyright in this. Maybe somehow we figure out a way to make that work. But my master's degree is in exercise science and sports psychology. Yeah. When I speak to Valentin, his master's degree in the Soviet Union was elite wrestling coaching. That's non-existent in America, a master's degree in elite wrestling coaching. So he sent me the books. I found them on eBay. I got them. There's math equations in those books. They're talking about force. They're talking about fulcrums. And I notice it's very similar to the Japanese approach, whereas I have a lot of American wrestling books. You don't hear a lot about mathematics, physics, and biomechanics. But that's how the Japanese and the Soviets are coming from it.
Wow. That's interesting. I mean, I guess... If you ask me how in my brain do I think about it, and I think a lot about the way the body moves, and then leverage points and that type of thing. So that's kind of how I try to discern between good techniques and bad techniques. Is okay, will this work when our opponent is only off balance, or will this work no matter what? Do I have the right leverage? How do I put my opponent off balance? These type of things are kind of what I'm thinking through in my head when I'm thinking about wrestling moves.
As opposed to just plow through. And I think that's unfortunately a lot of what American wrestling was. I know that's how I felt when I was competing. We're checking the boxes. We're going to practice. We're getting more time in than our opponents. We're doing a lot. We're throwing in some nutrition. We're throwing in some strength training. Just throw a lot at the wall versus efficiency. And I think that's one of the things that really made you special. One thing I wanted to talk to you about then, I remember you saying there was planners and there was cowboys. You spoke about that paradox.
That was that chapter has got turned into preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected. So a lot of my initial chapters kind because we talked about that, and that was one of my initial thoughts in this of like you got to have both sides of it. And so the original thought was hypocritical because you're like, well, you think this way, but then at different times you think this way, which is in opposition to the previous thought. So that became preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected. So whatever you want to talk about on it, let's do it.
Well, what have you seen? What's the difference? But what did you call them? Preppers versus Cowboys? What were the titles you get?
The Cowboys were, so this is the expecting the unexpected. The Cowboys were the dudes who did everything. You were a college athlete, and I think kids party less now than they did, say, 20 years ago. But I'm sure there was a kid or two on your college team who he ate like crap. He ate McDonald's all the time. He was like relatively lazy in practice. He probably partied too much. But it was when it was match day, he showed up and scrapped.
Yep. You
had a couple of them, didn't you? We all did,
yeah.
Right?
They knew how to just let it go and let it fly.
Let it fly, right? And so it was like, okay, these guys, nothing can go wrong because everything's already wrong. Like they're not prepared. They're not expecting something to go well because they're wild, right? They're Cowboys. Yeah. They're just showing up and letting it fly. And so that was kind of like. That one side of the mindset is, right, if you think of performance anxiety, it's because they're thinking way too much. Well, these guys who are Cowboys, they weren't really thinking at all, and that was why they performed great. But if you also had the other side, well, if they start doing everything in their lives correctly, they're also obviously also going to be more successful, right? So it's the marrying of two concepts. And so if you think of who has performance anxiety, the people who have performance anxiety are the ones who are super type A, very check all the boxes, do everything right, and then they get to the competition, they have performance anxiety. And the people who more naturally perform well are the ones who are like, this cowboy mentality. I'm just going to show up and fight them, and I don't need to have the the right diet, or I don't need to have the right training, or I don't need to sleep well. I can just show up and kick their butt, So that became preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected.
Yeah, and I think that's where
those guys annoying.
It is annoying. It's like, what the heck? It's like everyone that we're trying to do all the things right, but it just shows that there's lessons to be learned from everyone, and again that golden mean, because you're really not looking at. They appear to be opposites. They appear to be hypocritical, but they are not hypocritical.
Correct.
It's going back again to the ancient Greeks who were trying, like everything they were talking about was everything has to be reasonable. There has to be a level of balance. Whereas now we're not in really the age of balance and reasonability. We're in the age of disproportion, right? Like we're not thinking in terms of symmetry and proportionality like they are. Even look at the bodybuilders. There was a standard, like the golden standard, the Fibonacci sequence. These numbers like meant something. These proportions. That's why you look at like Renaissance art. These things were made to the T. Like even going back way further, the pyramids, like they follow these golden ratios of beauty. And now we're just like, bigger is better, right? More is better than less. It's like it is actually symptomatic of an overindulgence culture anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going too down into the weeds there.
No, it's good. I think, obviously my sentiment and, what I preach to almost all my athletes is if you can get this right in wrestling, you can get it right in life.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of concepts. Now, there are some concepts in wrestling, wrestling's very individualistic also. And so if you're going to go into business or something else, you likely need to learn how to work with people a little better. I always say that's one of the reasons. So AWA has 7 locations now. I don't believe anyone else has more than 2 or 3. Operating. Like, doesn't mean I go to one high school on Monday, one high school on Tuesday, one high school on Wednesday. And one of the big hurdles to get over is working together. You have to give up. You have to give up some control, and you have to say, Josh Wagner, who's our third. Josh Wagner, I think you're great. I trust you. I know you're going to do a great job. We're still going to have some conversations once in a while about. Honestly, he's great. I haven't had to have any conversations with him about expectations because he's just killing it, But it's like you have to give up a little bit of control in wrestling. People are very individualistic, very controlling. Oh, but no one does it as good as me. I don't want to give anyone else, they can't do it. Like there's a lot of guys, a lot of coaches who they won't let anyone else run part of their practice.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? Because it's like no one else can do it as good as me. And so, you have to be willing to give up some control and give up some of that time in order to build the next person. And now, we're seeing this flourish because our managers, we do trust them. They do a great job. They are really good coaches, and there's a lot of people who aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And if you don't, and there's always, and people could say, well, I don't care about that. You might say something, well, I really don't care about it. I'm happy. I'm fine. I'm doing my thing. I don't need this, extreme balance. Like, yeah, you do, because you're paying the price one way or the other. And then what happens is relationships start to suffer. You start burning yourself out because you can't trust other people.
Yeah, for sure. That's honestly. And and so there's certain young people who come talk to me about starting a wrestling academy or maybe working with us or maybe they want to do it somewhere else. And I said the number one burnout is if you do this by yourself, you have to be everywhere every weekend, or the kids feel like you're leaving them. And so it's like you start getting a family. Your wife is not going to want you to be gone every single weekend, and so we have a system where we set it up and we say, I'm going to be gone a couple weekends, Max will be gone a couple weekends. And all of our coaches will kind of rotate through who's going where. And so, the athletes are being taken care of, but we're kind of like rotating through because we've built a really great system. The other thing, in the end, Joe and I podcasted, so we built some content that we podcasted. Messina, and, he's extreme. I think I maybe made him see the light a little more at the end, but he said, he said, not Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. These guys are extreme. And I said, one of the things, because I got this bookshelf over here. Your books are behind you. I see them, right? But my bookshelf's over there. And
my books are all over this place. I got a whole row down there.
So initially, I started out by reading about elite athletes, and then, as I started doing business, I wanted to read about great business people. And yes, a lot of them are 100% extreme. And but Steve Jobs he's pretty much the ultimate example. Elon. He's got a lot of kids, but he's not been maybe a great husband because he's had like 3 or 4 wives now. But like Steve Jobs is way worse. Like everyone said he was such an a-hole, right? I mean, his if you read about his relationship with his wife and kid, it's really terrible. And so I almost think sometimes like some of these people weren't put on planet Earth to have relationships. Like we should just put Steve Jobs in the room and said, hey man. You put you in a cage after work, and then you wake up and you just go kill it all day, and they'll put you back in the cage. Like, for humanity's sake, we need you over here because you're a prime producer. Like, literally, you're going to flourish like almost no one has ever done in humanity's history. But people are going to suffer if they have relationships with you.
That's absolutely right. And we were all built for different things. And if you kind of fight that nature, like, yes, we all have to balance out like our sharp edges, so to speak. But at the same time, if you do feel a call in a certain direction, marriage, I mean, you're not going to be a good father or husband if you're not able to compromise. That's give a little, take a little. And there's no exact science to it. You're gauging each situation as it comes. Sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you don't. But you have to be comfortable where it's not always perfect, but you're trying for it to be.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's applicable to everything.
Hey, before we're done, I want to talk about another thing I did, and I'm sure you love this also. I did this journal, all-in journal, with a guy named Levi Jones out of Idaho. So I was just driving around one day after practice. I was frustrated because some of my athletes they just weren't recalling enough stuff, like they weren't remembering enough things. I'm like, they need a journal because it's something I've habitually journaled in one way or another since I don't know, say age 14. Like I'm 40 now. It's been a really long time where I always am writing stuff down. And I have a few different. I have one where it's like that's kind of doodle and write stuff down. And then another one where it's like this is what I need to do every day type thing. Scheduling. But I was like, okay, I need to make a journal. And I'm like, oh my god, making a journal is gonna be so freaking. So much work. And then I had done a few advertisements for Levi a few years back, and I had called him and I said, hey, I thought your journal was great, but there's a few things that I think I would do differently. Would you be open to working together? And he said, yeah, for sure. So we collaborated on it, and it came out, and it's great. And so I don't know if you guys have a journal. To my knowledge, I'm not sure if you do, but
people should get both. Get both.
Yeah, it journal. I mean, you maybe speak to journaling. What do you guys advise for journaling?
Yeah, I remember speaking to Terry Brands about this actually, and he was saying him and John McGovern and Dennis Hall this was years ago, man. Wow, this is probably almost a decade ago. And they were saying the consensus was, all the best are journaling. So you have to put the pen to paper. And the great thing about the resource that you have there is that it guides your thinking and your writing, because it's like, okay, you tell a kid, take it, have a journal. right? And it's like, okay, so now they have this journal. They bought the 3-ring binder, which is better than most kids, better than 80% of the kids. They bought the pad. Now it's like, okay, well now what? What do I write? So so being led by experts like what you're doing, that's huge for them. They need that. They need that thinking, the structured thinking, and then as time goes on, then they could start being more free flow. Each
that's
kid's
how, I gave one to Mitchell Messenbrink, and he's even like, I don't want to be a butthole, but I kind of got my own system, so I don't know if I want to use yours. It's like, okay, fine, that's no problem at all. And so it's like when you get to a certain level, to your point, when you've done it for a long time, then it's like, yeah, you're free, and kind of what I do, right? You're kind of free to go on your own, but when you're in the beginning and you've never journaled before in your life, it's really helpful to have someone give you some guidance. I mean, just like wrestling, right? It's like when you get to the level of an expert, a lot of it is, in my opinion, figuring out on your own. Like you could try to pick things from other people, but a lot of it is you and your own brain taking. Actually, my Mental Monday to my athletes last week was about autonomy, right? Yep. You taking the autonomy to say, this is my career. Here is the path that I want it to take. And yes, are you going to use me for guidance? Sure. Are you going to have other coaches for guidance? Yeah, absolutely. May you watch some, national champions and pick up a few things for sure, but it's your career. You take charge of it.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking I would even challenge Mitchell Messenbrink there and other people who have that mentality, because it's not saying that they don't have something that's working. Great, that's excellent. But it's funny how we're sometimes not consistent with the approach we take to wrestling as we are to mindset. I bet if you showed a move, hey, try this in this situation, even if it seems a little wild, they might play with it in practice. Well, if you give them a guided way of thinking and there's a different journal, it's like, hey, well, try it for a week and see if that adds anything. Even one little piece that could help you, it's worth exploring, at least even slightly, rather than just, nope, I got it. Right? The white belt mentality.
Yeah, for sure. Mitchell is that's one of the things we battle about. He's awesome, but he has been stubborn. He's obviously, as he's gotten older and more mature, he's definitely become more open to other things. But he definitely likes things the way he likes his things, and I would say it's working pretty well for him.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ben, the work you're doing is great. And I think understanding just as humans, just in general, from a psychology perspective, it's not so black and white. We all exist on a continuum across all of these different constructs. And at different points in time in our life, the balance shifts. And how do we maintain that extreme balance? That's, I think, what you're doing is so important. You and Joe and your materials. So we certainly recommend all of our wrestlers and anyone who's watching to make sure they get hold of it. We'll put a link in the show notes. Just send me that and I'll throw it in there. Any other points that you wanted to make?
No, that's it. That was fun. I love talking about wrestling mindset. It's one of my favorite things. To talk about the psychology of the sport. And it feels really good to get this book out because it's kind of something I've had in my head for, I don't know, a decade-ish. You brought up the cowboy thing, which was my initial name for that chapter many, many moons ago. So it comes out next Tuesday, September 17th. It's on Amazon. We're already the number one new release in sports psychology. So I did look the field up because I'm like, what are we beating, like 3 people? There's at least 56 books, at least, in new releases in sports psychology, so we're beating all 56 of them. So that felt good. It feels good to get it out there, and I hope it's going to help a lot of people.
Definitely will. We recommend all your materials to people. Make sure you check out everything that Ben puts out. He puts out something 10 years from now. Buy that too, because it's only going to help you. It just keeps getting better and better. And again, thanks for all you've done for the sport, Ben, and all you've done for us with the Wrestling Minds. You've always been very, very good to us, and mentioning us on Joe Rogan, these things you've done for us, even as we were small and we were coming up. So, we certainly don't forget that, and we want to thank you for that. So keep up.
I appreciate you guys helping people think right, because as you said, some people think they don't need it, but everybody needs it. Everybody needs it.
Absolutely. Ben Askren, thanks again. Take care.
Peace. See ya.